And welcome on in. We got a lot of things ahead on this beautiful Monday, and we're going to kick it off with a bang. I've got Representative Tricia Byrnes in studio with me for a few segments. She's, of course, running for the 10th District of the State Senate here in, well, not just Wentzville. It's also Callaway, Lincoln, Montgomery, Pike, and then, of course, a good portion of the western side of St. Charles County here. Tricia Byrnes, how are you? Thank you for being here.
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad. My initial plan was to catch up with you a couple of weeks ago, but then not only did you get busy, but you got sidelined for a little while there. So we're very glad that you're feeling better and recovering very well. Yes, yeah. It's a very bad time to decide. Your body says, nope, we're going to go to the hospital and deal with some issues right now. This is not the time. A month before a primary.
I had my gallbladder removed, so people know it was emergency surgery.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be like a outpatient deal. 3 days into pain. I finally like, yeah, maybe something's wrong. And I had 3 complications after that. And at some point, I'm like, okay, here's the deal. Let's just keep me alive. I can't be in the Senate if I'm dead. But here I am. Good Lord kept me alive. But 10 days in the last 30 days of my race. Can you believe that?
Oh, my gosh. That's just wild. Well, I'm glad that you're back on your feet. We're glad to see you doing well. And thank you for taking some time to come in. I know we've got a lot of folks who are familiar with you. Of course, you've hosted for me before when I was out on paternity leave earlier this year. I'm very grateful for that. But I wanted to make sure that we had an opportunity. First of all, we're marching toward Election Day here, August 4. A lot of folks, can vote before time. A lot of, most of the Republican primary crowd, I would argue, are Election Day voters like me. I like to do this on the day, go in and cast my ballot. So we've got some big decisions here in the next couple of weeks. You, of course, are running for District 10 here in the Senate. And I would love to just get, because I've got a bunch of issues here that have been coming up. Of course, data centers are top of mind, all sorts of things. But I'd love to just start with a little bit of a background. In case, for some reason, someone's not familiar with you, they're just tuning in, I'd love to hear, you've spent some time in the House, but who you are, what you're about, and then going to the Senate. Why in the world do you want to do this? Because you've got a competitive primary now. So, obviously, it's a few years and the House wasn't enough. You are a glutton for punishment to go to the other chamber as well. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so I'll just start with the who I am or who I was. I was a mom. Now, I did have a tech background in a way. I was first in tech in '96 from a sales marketing perspective, and I continued to do online marketing until I started serving in the House. So that's basically about me, and I had a real estate business for some time there. After building other people's businesses, I thought, why don't I build my own brand? So that was a couple of years, and then I started making good money and said, apparently I hate money. Let's go represent the people. No, what happened was my son had cancer in 2015, and that's when I found out about the nuclear bomb plant that was next to Francis Howell. Mm-hmm. And I swam in the quarry that was out there and connected with all the moms from all the different groups. We brought everyone together, and I realized pretty quickly, I called Aaron Brockovich, called all the folks, and realized that we needed to be part of a federal fund. So I started advocating for RECA, which is that Radiation Exposure Compensation Act. And around COVID time, the issue kind of just laid flat, right? So I knew we needed one of us to be in the House. So that's why I decided to run for office. I first ran for alderman. And really, I just thought maybe somebody I would meet there, I could tell them the story. Because it took a lot. When you first would tell this to somebody, it would just kind of glaze over them, right? Mm-hmm. It's a lot to say. 80 years, nuclear bomb waste, right. Everyone's dying. Which is so horrible. And we just couldn't get anyone to engage. So that's when the mayor of Wentzville said, hey, you're really not going to be able to have anyone carry your story. You really need to run for state rep yourself. And so that's how I got into it. And made a bunch of noise. Very calculated noise. It wasn't just up there burning things down for no reason, but I definitely got some attention. And then our whole group came out for a committee hearing we had. And it was 200 people. They rented buses. They made shirts. And I think that when the people show up is when things change. You guys know that, your grassroots and coalition building. And at the end of the year, Senator Hawley showed up and he ran that legislation. So amazing. And it was his number one priority and he got it done. Trump signed that bill last year. The reason why I tell people that story isn't for them to go, oh, do I need RECA or not? Okay, should I vote for her or not? Is to say that I have learned how to build coalitions and get people to work together at all levels, and it gets stuff done for the people. And some people were asking me, like, what is your brand? You do missing people, You did the 988, you'll do CDL. Like, what is the brand? And I said, at the end of the day, what I do is if powerful interests or insiders are harming the people, I'm going to be the one that wants to stand up and get a coalition of items and win for the people. So that's kind of my thing. That's what I like to do, the passion thing that involves a coalition. So that's the why I'm here. Oh, well, why specifically? I'll be honest. I was like, not going to do this again, right? You guys have all heard this. Now they had to escalate it till I called 911. I mean, seriously, when you have to pull over and over again to find out how to beat Tricia Byrnes, it's pretty sad. But I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to do it. And then the two people that I trusted that I thought would be great so that I could still go to them if I wasn't in the Capitol with the school thing, because I'm trying to bring back books. I'm working on that. And we have a nationwide outcry, right? They decided they weren't going to run at the last minute. And I'll be honest, I was like, there's no way I want a lobbyist representing me. Point blank. I don't think any grassroots conservative that I know of thinks it's a good idea for a lobbyist to be writing our bills. We typically want to stand up to a lobbyist.
Yeah, and it certainly strikes me whenever you see someone, because you first entered the House in first election was 2022, right?
Yes.
And see, that's the thing. Typically, a lot of what we see, a lot of what I think the grassroots dislikes is when you see someone who kind of serves their time and then moves to the next thing. So I had 4 years and 4 terms in the House and then my 2 terms in the Senate. For someone to step back from a House term, what ought to be a safe seat as an incumbent, even to run for a different office, or you could call it a higher office, that's still, you're leaving a position of safety. And that automatically catches, I think, a lot of people's eyes, because that's just not normal. If you're trying to play the game and be a part of the system and just sink into it, you do your time and then you move on. So when someone doesn't do that, it always makes me wonder where the motivation is coming from, because that's usually not just my own self position here. This is safe, so I'll ride this until it's done.
Right. I do think I had a safe seat. I mean, nobody should really feel like they're entitled to that, for sure. But I was in a good position and doing, had a lot of successes. I mean, I wrote a newspaper that we've shipped out, 16 pages of successes and things that we're working on and really moving the needle on. And I really potentially could have walked into retirement, right? I don't even know what it is. I mean, I have no idea if I walked away from $1,200 a month or $50 a month. I have no idea. But if you serve 6 years, then you get a retirement. But no, I dipped out of that early, but decided that this is worthwhile because of some of the issues that I want to work on in the Senate.
Yeah. Well, let's get back to some of those issues. Again, we're on with State Representative Tricia Byrnes, running for Senate District 10 here in this area particularly, but of course out west and up north as well. We'll be right back on The Reckoning, folks. Don't go anywhere. Hey, welcome on back to The Reckoning. Into the next segment we roll along. That's right. We are back at it. I've got State Representative Tricia Byrnes here with me. If you'd like to look her up, I encourage you to do that, running for Senate here in District 10. You can, of course, look up her background and bio, where she currently represents sponsored bills, on her House page. But TriciaByrnes.com, that's BYRNES, BYRNES.com, TriciaByrnes.com, of course, on Facebook as well. Tricia Byrnes for State Senate, and over on X at Byrnes63385. I love that. You got to represent the zip code. But at first I saw that, and I'm like, well, it's a string of numbers. Oh, that's not just a string of numbers. That's my zip code where I grew up. I know that number. I know it. But back now, and I would love to get into, because when this first crossed my radar and we were intending on getting you on, it's because there was a lot to do. I think it was the week that this Route N Great Places study came up. And this, of course, is the potential planning effort involving St. Charles County, the East-West Gateway, designed to, examine future land use connectivity along the Highway N corridor. And this actually came up, I think, the week. It was it was like the week after, or 2 weeks after we had our big St. Charles County executive debate. And we had, the 3 primary candidates in here, and then that was a part of it, and it got pretty explosive and exciting. If you didn't listen to that, you can go back, pick it up, folks, on the podcast. But, of course, the Great Places study there on Route N came up. And then your name, Tricia, started popping up with not just this, but with data centers across the state, with the efforts around here especially. And now we've got all sorts of terms. Moratoriums in this county and that county. Land, and, that's just a plan. And, it's not a plan. Well, this actually might be purchased. What brought data centers to your attention, the first time? When was this? When did these start coming on your radar here in Missouri?
So the first time was actually the one in St. Charles City. And I looked it up. There's a photo of me being out there August of 2025. And I already said I had a tech background. And now I'm not tech cool, coding or anything, but just marketing and sales stuff. But enough to kind of know the business, right? And wherever I worked, there was typically a data center somewhere. There was a bunch of servers in the basement, and some guy usually made sure they all worked for us. So I was a little confused by that. So I went out to the meeting, and we just passed Senate Bill 4, which I was completely against. That's where we pay for the power plants in advance of them being finalized, and for monopolies, I should say. So I was concerned about that. The data center pops open in St. Charles City. And do you remember when the water issue in St. Charles City was an issue? It was on the north side. So it wasn't Weldon, it was on the north side. Okay. Well, I did a deep dive into that. This is all going to make sense. I did a deep dive into that, and I had maps of all the vinyl chloride plume, dichloroethylene out there, and it's also surrounding those wells. So when I was out at this conference, not conference, but the thing that they had about that St. Charles data center, a hydrogeologist that I've worked with to look at Weldon stuff came up and he said, hey, do you think they know that they're at all in proximity of that abandoned Superfund site? And I said, I don't know. We probably should know, right? Because they need to at least understand the proximity if they're going to be drawing a lot of water out of there. And I said, well, go over there and look at their plans. He comes back and he said they have absolutely no idea what's going on with the water in proximity to where this proposed data center would be. And I said, okay, well, that's all I need to know. I walked over to the data center people and I said, I'm now a no on this data center. And this is why it's important with what's now becoming a transparency issue. So like the issue's shifting for me. I don't really buy into the tinfoil crown, right? Like, because sometimes I like to say, well, let's look at this reasonably. But as soon as I see something that stinks, like you have no concept of that, that's when I'm going to be concerned, right? And so what ended up happening is I started asking people about these data centers, like what makes this different, and why are we all of a sudden preparing and hearing for this just treasure trove of data centers that Missouri's going to get, right? And it's just been a lot of conversations, and I feel like I've had some of the pushback. Congressman Bob Onder came to the Capitol to hear some of our concerns, and I told him that I was really concerned that there's perhaps a money grab for these data centers, and that's what's causing all of the development. And he did a really good job of listening, but nobody else really was looking at that. They just were like, oh, it's liquid gold, and I'm like, I just would like to see how many people they're employing afterwards.
Right.
And so I started asking those questions. And then all of a sudden, when Montgomery County, I think where it really tripped me up is I was like, wait a second. They had a ribbon cutting, and I'm in that Senate district, and I didn't even get an invite there. What in the heck is going on? I also think that the 988 hit pieces on me are connected. I don't think they wanted environmental girl who already was a no in St. Charles City sniffing around their new, sandbox out here. And I met with the people out in Montgomery County, and they weren't doing this crazy alarmist type stuff. They had legitimate questions, right? How is the taxpayers funding this? Matter of fact, what they told me, and I don't know if it's the Amazon project now or the Google one, but they were telling me that their county is buying the servers so that they could give them a personal property tax, I guess, moratorium or something for 75% off or something. So my concern has been, well, wait a second. Never in the history of our country, right, if somebody has this phenomenal idea, there's plenty of investment money to go around. So now, why all of a sudden, in the greatest idea in the history of America, right, do we need to turn our citizens into investors through, because they're taxpayers, and now all of a sudden they're investors. And that's when I really started to say, okay, something's going on here.
So some of your colleagues in the House have, told me one of the distinctions I've heard. Some of the folks who are more pro data center, which again, this is an issue I kind of separate into a few different conversations, and I feel like it often gets lumped into one, and that's hard to come down with a yes or no. Well, are you talking about the greater concerns about AI and where the industry is going, what companies are in charge? We're talking about the actual infrastructure that's moving into our area, what it's going to be used for, how it benefits the people, how it potentially strains, the grid and energy resources and different things. One of the things from the pro side that I've heard is, well, there is a huge difference with two different kinds of companies. They're the ones where you know who it is, like out in Montgomery County, for example, as it was given to me. We know this is, was it Google and Meta, I think, or no, Amazon.
No, but they did it.
But that's the thing. I'm hearing, well, these are a little bit of a different proposition than when you have people who are buying land to try to sell it for a data center, but we don't actually know who is behind it or who's potentially buying it or what company is moving in. Do you put any weight to that, or is it all kind of the same to you? The transparency process is a problem.
They're running narratives. I swear, half time I think they're all just trying to become Ameren lobbyists or something. Because we had Senate Bill 4, which laid out the red carpet. So to say, well, we know they're Google and we know they're Amazon, I'm going to call BS on that, because we didn't know they were Google and Amazon until the ribbon cutting, right?
Okay.
But all of the contracts were already done. A lot of that was done without the community's knowledge. And now, all of a sudden, a lot of people feel like it's already a done deal. So a lot of people in my Senate district, right, because you know where it reaches, a lot of them felt like, well, at least that's Montgomery County, and that doesn't necessarily apply to me. But what I noticed is Montgomery County had the solar farm, right? And now here they have the data centers. So then in Callaway, they have this huge solar farm. Well, guess what? Now, all of a sudden, they're getting data centers. And now we have Lincoln County. They're getting, I believe, 1,500 acres of solar farms with what I was told was Ameren, right? So I'm like, well, then you guys just became part of a data center conversation as well. So this narrative that, well, some of them, they told them who they were. No, they told them who they were after the fact. And I did reach out to find out about their electric contract, because that was one of the things I remember from St. Charles City. I asked about the electric contract because I said, well, hold up. If all of a sudden we didn't have enough base load for our current businesses, how do we have enough base load for potentially 5 data centers within the same footprint of Ameren? Make sense for me, right?
Right.
So then they talked about back then in 2025. And if I said 2005, I was wrong. 2025.
2025. Okay.
Okay. So when they were talking about that, they were talking about ramping up, right? There would be a contract that ramped up. But if you talk to people who are pro data center, right, the first thing they'll tell you in electricity is, well, they have a 15-year contract. Okay. Here's where it's important to ask additional questions. I said, 15-year contract. How much? What is the percentage guarantee of that contract? Well, 80%. Okay, so then it's not a full 15-year contract, right? And I said, now let me use what I learned from before in St. Charles City. That was a contract that was going to ramp up the usage. Is that the same case in this 80% of 15-year guarantee? Well, actually, yes, that is the case. It's going to ramp up. Okay, so this is no longer a 15-year guarantee. So then my question is, well, if I have to pay for the building as a ratepayer, right, does that mean that you're only going to add on one room at a time at the rate that they ramp up of their 15% contract? I mean, their 15-year contract, right? Or are you just going to fully have to build that facility for their peak use? Because my concern is, with the amount of data centers that are going in all across the country, if this doesn't work, or if technology changes, because, God forbid that would happen, right? After all of these residents are taxpayers, then what? One of the things it's a terrible analogy, but I kind of joke, it would be like in the late 1990s going, oh my gosh, we need vinyl factories all over. Have you seen these new bag phones? Like that. Or I feel like I'm watching my entire state invest in Blockbuster after I just walked out of the Netflix presentation of what the future looks like. It's just bizarre to me to think things won't change.
Yeah, things are changing very fast. And Oh boy, that's a big. I want to know. I want to know where the big conversation is in Missouri about increasing nuclear power. I'd like to see that if we're actually having a serious conversation
Right.
about expanding our possibilities and not dragging
Yeah.
down the current grid.
Right.
Folks, we're
Let's
on
talk
with.
about that.
I was going to say, let's hit that next. We're on with Representative Tricia Byrnes running for Senate District 10. We'll be right back here on The Reckoning, folks. Hey, welcome on back to The Reckoning. Into the next segment we roll along. I've got Representative Tricia Byrnes here with me, not just a state representative running for Senate District 10, but of course now a publisher, a newspaper publisher. I see this the Byrnes banner. I like this. So where all? Well, first of all, where all did this go? Where can people get a hold of a copy if they'd like to? Is this a one-time installment, or are you doing more of these?
This is, well, one of the things is you see so many hit pieces in Senate races that the thing that I can control, with our committee is I wanted to make sure that we got our accomplishments out there and some of the things that we're still working on. Because a lot of times at the end of the day, I'm still trying to fix things. So this, another example in here is on page 10. It's put the tablet down, Burns fights for pencils, cursive, writing, and books back in schools. That's still an issue to me. So I'm like, well, we need this in here because I still want to educate people. When I first came out on Facebook in 2024 and said, hey, have we gone too far with tech and education? People flipped their lids. They're like, of course not. And what's really funny is we've taken these books out of schools, and then people are like, no, kids, kindergartners with iPads, that's how they're going to become the next greatest developer. The developers do not send their kids to schools that have tech in them in the early years. They're all analog. And people are now starting to learn that, the stuff that I was researching in 24. So we got very, very far this year. I got it through the House. And when I say I'm talking about a team of us who are working on this.
Right.
So we got it through the House. We got it through Senate committee. And then it died on the floor with our senator that was running it. And I'm like, I was actually watching her through the window, and I'm telling you, if it was me in there, that thing would not have gone down. I would have figured out how to navigate that. And then some people were like, well, Trish, don't worry about it. It's just 1 year. I'm like, it's not 1 year to me. Like, just Wentzville, okay? That's 17,000 third graders that just left third grade fully, learning or trying to learn on iPads and stuff like that. So that's why these things matter. That's why some of these things are in here, because I still want to educate people on the issues. Yeah. But I know you have a lot of questions for me.
No, I was going to say let's get back to it. First thing we touched on it, when we were talking about data centers, but I was curious. You've kind of jumped full into the fight over it's data center adjacent, the issue over farmland, which of course has continued to pop up, and I think this may be a quick resolution to get your thoughts on it. But I know like we said, the Route End Great Places study kind of ruffled some feathers here. A lot of folks who, at least according to the political ads I'm seeing, some of them were unaware that their farm was potentially on the chopping block. Although, again, as everyone insists, these are just potential looking at plans, although they've got a fancy name to it. So that means someone's thought about it a good deal. What are you seeing? I mean, when we talk about the legacy of century farms and family farms here in Missouri, what are you hearing and seeing? You've got a lot of rural, district. What are you hearing and seeing from them? Is there a real concern about being pushed out or new projects coming in, or is, as I hear from the other side of it, hey, people are allowed to sell their property if they want. This is something that they get to decide. Is there not much of a worry about it? If they're interested in selling, they'll sell, and they're not being pressured. What are you seeing and hearing from folks as you travel?
Kind of two different groups. So that Great Places on Route N, that's one of those. I walked in there expecting to get an update on the Highway N project. And then my favorite MoDOT guy walked out, and I was like, well, that's weird. That was my first sign that maybe this wasn't a MoDOT update. And then I walked around. There's probably 10 banners. I mean, they easels, completely drawn out plans down to benches, trees, little pathways. I've never seen such a detailed plan. Normally, when you have a 5-year plan or a 20-year outlook, you look at more of a map, and it's just color-coded. But these were detailed drawings of houses and stuff. And I was just flabbergasted. And my first thought was, who's going to pay all the property taxes for all these kids? Like, you better start giving some land away to the school district, because this is going to be a lot of people. And as I went from easel, I'm like, what is going on here? I was so upset, and people can go through. I mean, it was just a very rough Facebook Live. I walked out in the parking lot. I'm like, you're not going to believe what I saw. And I'm like, you know what? You guys are going to go see it, because I'm going to walk back in there. And on my way back in, that's when I saw 3 generations from that century
Uh-huh.
farm. And they were so upset. And as I put my phone down, one of them, I was kind of talking to him, and you kind of see that I just have a conversation. And she says, "Are they going to try to push me off my land?" Like, that's pretty intimidating. They went there for the same road update. They didn't expect to see their land completely destroyed, covered in a future city, right? Turns out that happened to the farm owners on the other side. And they're telling me, like, they get people knocking on their doors every day telling them to sell. But now all of a sudden they're the last holdouts. And then there's this meeting from out-of-state developers. It felt pretty nefarious. Like, it just felt icky. And I was on the board for 3 years at the Board of Aldermen. I've never seen anything just blindside me so much with "this is the future, take it or leave it." And they even interviewed kids, and the kids liked the drawings. I was like, of course they like the cartoons. So that was kind of this blindsided thing. And I think that is the concern. They're just feeling blindsided, right? Like, hey, since you're a farmer, maybe you don't care about the future. So we're just going to shove you to the side, and we're moving on, like it or not. And there's this whole narrative. Either you're for data centers in the future, or you're against data centers and you're in the Stone Age. But it's one of those issues, right, where the ocean can be beautiful and dangerous at the same time. And the people, I'm like, where are the people in the center of this issue that says, no, I think we should try to understand how you have 53 data centers coming in one state, but this is happening all across the states. And I've talked to representatives. I now have a weekly call, because coalition building, right, where we're trying to map out what is similar. And it's like this playbook was handed out. It's the same thing. You get some advisor that moves into your community. All of a sudden there's road projects, and there's, secret plans going on, and they're all coded. And it's all seeming to be targeting the farmland. But I'm finally, I don't know, I go back and forth. Are they trying to take farmland out of production? Is there a reason for that? Or is it an unintended consequence of this race for federal tax incentives along with state, and it sounds like, some county projects? I'm starting to maybe say maybe it's just an unintended consequence. But I think we need to say, hey, I think people think Missouri is special. Like, we were just picked for all of the data centers. But when I say, no, we weren't, it's happening in every single state.
Yeah.
So if we're not the special little snowflake, how about you join me and at least see, is this look like it has a future, and why wasn't there a feasibility study?
So, given the opportunity to serve in the Senate, what would be some of your first priorities that you'd like to see happen legislatively to address this, even if it's just pumping the brakes and saying, hold on, from a state level, we're going to do X and Y and Z to make sure that people aren't just running away with unintended consequences or with nefarious plans?
Right. Number one, absolutely no NDAs. That cannot happen. I do think that there's reasons to maybe hide the name, because if the project doesn't work, it might impact their stocks either positively or negatively, right? But outside of the name of that business, nothing else should be secret. Because, again, I go back to the hydrogeologist conversation, and he was telling me that a lot of times they don't give you these specs. And he said you could have a data center on one side of the highway that is completely different on how that water is going to operate on the other based on their specs. The other thing they're doing is these like grandiose, everything's fine, right? Like I don't even know, millions of water in the aquifer. And I know that the impression is to give people that, okay, in our community, this aquifer we all drink out of is X big. This aquifer goes all the way up to Ohio, right? So how many data centers are you putting into this aquifer? Because it's not just that millions and millions of gallons underneath this one business. And there's been so much misrepresentation. When I see something that's off, that's when I want to ask some more questions. And there's just some more things I saw that were off based on what I know.
Very good. Well, we will be back for another segment. Again, Representative Tricia Byrnes running for Senate District 10 here in Missouri. We will get to the 988 issue on the other side.
Oh, you mean what we now said is the 911 issue?
Yes, I'd like to hear about that because I've heard plenty. I'd like to hear it directly from you. We'll be right back, folks, with Tricia Byrnes. Don't miss out. Another segment here on The Reckoning. Hey, welcome on back to The Reckoning and to the final segment of this first hour we go. If my voice holds out. Woo, I got a little more excited there than I could handle without a deep breath. Back to it with Representative Tricia Byrnes again, running for State Senate District 10. That election is coming up August 4, folks, August the 4th. And this one has been, like I said, a little bit of a spicy race as it's turned into state Senate races are not. At one point, it seemed calm and generally reasonable to run for state Senate. Now it has become this big, expensive, very, just fisticuffs event. So more power to you for getting into one of those. That's an interesting one. But this one, the 988 issue, I have seen multiple articles now going into a quote, as it is often represented, I'll say this way, what it is a lot of folks are criticizing you for an issue that you've tested, quote unquote, as they say, in those nice little quotation marks, tested the 988 suicide and crisis lifeline. And this is being held up as everything from criminal conduct to attention-getting politician. I've seen all of it. What is going on with the 988 thing? What is this? If you tell me the story from your side, the true story.
Super simple. I had an issue in the district back in December of 2024, and I thought, well, I probably shouldn't call 911. I'll call 988 because my impression was they were trying to maybe push the mental health issues off to 988 instead of 911. That was kind of my thoughts. So I wanted to de-escalate a situation. I was a little concerned. Couldn't text 911. Other areas of our state can. And 24 minutes after answering a bunch of demographic questions and getting sent a link after I said I didn't need LGBTQ youth, LGBTQ youth services, I said no to that. But I kept asking these questions, answering these questions, and if I didn't answer it exactly right, or if I tried to be like, wait, hey, this is what's happening, it didn't matter. It would then repeat the question. So it was like it was such a bad chatbot. I would almost say it was an Excel spreadsheet, or like a form. Here was the question. You had A, B, C, or D. Nothing else was accepted. That went on for 24 minutes. And as soon as I got off the call, I reached out to one of my mentors in the House, Don Mayhew. I sent him the screenshots. I sent him the screenshots of the transgender survey. And we both agreed everyone who sees that phone says that's going to kill somebody. Did some research that if you don't have somebody on the phone in less than a minute, suicides go up 50%. So the big fear was this has probably already killed people. And what I didn't like about it is they're targeting kids. And I don't mean, I kind of do mean targeting kids. The 988 shows up in almost posters throughout everyone's schools. It's everywhere. The other thing that I think we did kind of fix along the way is I said, I have a big problem with this because from a marketing background, you're saying the 988 suicide and mental health crisis line. You have the word suicide in every classroom in Missouri on billboards. There was a billboard that I saw part of this program, and it said, did your boyfriend break up with you? Call 988 suicide prevention. No, we don't need to tell 13-year-old girls if your boyfriend broke up with you, you should contemplate suicide, but we'd like to talk you off the ledge. Why don't you text 988? I mean, that's what we were doing. So they were like, okay, good point. So when I talked to Don Mayhew, he arranged a meeting in Rolla. We met with Compass. We met with the federal provider of the 988 program. We went through the issues that I just talked about having suicide words everywhere, and about this chatbot. We also talked about the transgender survey. And I tried to get them to do stuff. Like if you look, I didn't pre-file that bill in January as soon as I got there. I waited a couple weeks because we tried to get them to figure out how to do that fix. And then because then the pushback was, well, it's federal. We can't do anything about it. I was like, yeah, we can. Because if the federal government is hurting kids in Missouri, we have a right to stand up and do something. So ultimately, the bill that I filed was if you reach out by call, text, or chat to 988, you need a live person to triage what the issue is to see if they need 911 or if they just need to chat. I think that's extremely simple. That hearing was with Representative Holly Jones. It was House Bill 1148. And so I had that hearing coming up on that Tuesday. And Thursday, before the hearing, Compass Health walked into my office. I want to even say unannounced. I don't think I really even had much of a heads up. They just wanted to stop in and talk about what I was trying to do with 988. It was the CEO of Compass, 3 vice presidents, and their lobbyists. And now I had people that were in there. Holly Jones was there. She left pretty quickly after they came in. And this is the gotcha moment, okay? So we talk about it. We talk about how it's not connected to 911, what happens if the caller loses interest or they commit suicide or harm themselves, right? Because there's no connection to finding out exactly where that caller was coming from. So I've called the FCC. I mean, it did a lot of research on how this needed improvement. So the vice president of clinical innovation sits next to me, looks at my phone. She's shocked. She says, we need to run like a script that escalates to see if we could get these chatbots. At some point, these keywords should trigger it out of the 988 text services and switch over to the 988 Compass call center. Mm-hmm. Somebody should pick up that phone. They had my number the entire time. So, yeah, we go through it. And we start with, she says, go ahead and put in, I no longer want to live. We do that. We escalate it. She sees all of the demographic questions, the LGBTQ stuff. She says, put in there, I have a gun in my house. Tells me how that's a big training with their people to separate somebody from a weapon. So we put that in, because she's like, right there, you say gun, boom, that's going to be answered.
So you're doing a live test with the company.
On a text of 988, text messages.
So you're texting it live with the company heads or some company execs sitting right there.
Vice President of Clinical Innovation.
Okay.
Yes. With a state representative who's also a lawyer sitting in the room.
And when you text it, I have a gun in the house.
So that escalated. So then we put in there that one of the questions is suicidal, and one of the options is 24 hours. Then it says, how sad are you? 1 to 5. We put 5. We put all of the markers that said you should pick up this call immediately. And then what does it do? It goes to the transgender survey. And she's like, you've got to be kidding me. Think about this. I mean, this is minutes into this, and then we get a transgender survey. We already said no to the LGBTQ. And it's several, like, what do we have? We have it right here in the Byrnes banner on page 3. But it talks about girl, boy, and then it even says stuff like two-spirit, third gender, gender not listed. I mean, it is pretty inclusive of all the possible genders, right? And then it asks, are you transgender? Yes, no, maybe, not sure. I'm like, you got to be kidding me, right? So we're all flabbergasted, and we determined that phone never rang, that this is, if it hasn't killed people already, this is going to kill people, right? And then I didn't realize it at the time till I went back, because everything's timestamped from when I called, when I got a call. An hour and 22 minutes after we started that test, I got a call I missed a call from Jefferson City Police, and then I called it right back because I was on the house floor. And I said, this is Tricia Byrnes. When she said, hi, this is, I was like, oh. I said, hey, this is Tricia Byrnes. I was with Compass, and we tested 988 because we've seen some ridiculous failures with this 988 service. Mm-hmm. And they said, well, you know how long this took us? And I'm like, well, essentially I'm thinking, yeah, I need to know, because an hour and 22 minutes on a suicide hotline is unacceptable too. What was one of our concerns? When I did my research, I talked to 911 folks. They said it's a horrible waste of time. Mm-hmm. But then what happened is the prosecutor of that area for the Capitol threatened me and said I had 24 hours to resign or face felony terrorism charges. No, that's not what happened first. First, what I was told is if I continued with my hearing on 988, I would be charged with a crime. You tell me that I'm trying to help kids, this is a big boondoggle, and you tell me if I have a hearing, a legislative hearing, I'm going to be charged with a crime, I'm going to have that hearing every time. I'm going to pick kids every single time. And then after I did it, sure enough, made good on the threat, House attorney comes in and goes, I can't believe this. He wants the video of the hearing. What's ironic is during that hearing, one of the state reps, she's the ranking member, she's a Democrat, holds up her phone and says something to the effect of, I just text, I was going to kill myself. I too got chatbots. This is an emergency. It needs to be fixed. You guess what happened to her? Nothing. Guess what happened to me the first time I needed help? Nothing. Nobody even said, hey, did everything work out okay? No, the only thing that happened was after a test with Compass, an hour and 22 minutes later, I get a call that says, did I say I had a gun to my head? So that shouldn't have been a problem. Here's the other piece of this. By the time I get done being completely abused by that prosecutor, by the way, there is a bar complaint against him, an active one. But there, obviously it wasn't when this went on. That was filed in June. But anyway, at one point, his final email about this to my attorney was, I believe there's now strong evidence the representative was acting at the very strong encouragement of a Compass Health employee/official. And using the reasonable man standard, I believe that someone in the representative's shoes would not necessarily have recognized the risk of calling or texting 988 when the agent of 988's operating agency was asking them to do it. Thus, even though there is no dispute she sent the text, I do not believe representative possessed the mens rea necessary for criminal liability. Did you hear any of that when they go and slam me? No.
No, none of that's in the articles.
Yeah, defamation charges. I think anybody who wants to hitch their wagon to this defamation case, do it in writing. Do it in writing, because you know what else I have? I have proof on my phone, and I had it forensically downloaded, that the team that tried to help me with this 988, Axiom, now represents my opponent. They knew the truth, and they pulled this until they finally turned it into a fake 911 story.
Oh, my. Shenanigans abounding, folks, and we haven't even gotten to that hour yet. State Representative Tricia Byrnes, she's running for Senate. Thank you, Tricia, for coming on. TriciaByrnes.com. You go and follow her on socials as well. Folks, we'll be right back on The Reckoning on the other side of the hour.